The air in the train station cafe always smelled of stale coffee, yesterday's dust, and the lingering scent of coal smoke from the engines outside. For Ilara, it was the smell of her life. 10 years old, small for her age, with hands often chapped from washing dishes and a heart that carried a weight far too heavy for a child. Her Aunt Beatrice ran the cafe, a small, cramped space tucked into a corner of the bustling but aging station. After Ilara's mother had passed away and her father, lost to a different kind of darkness, was no longer in the picture, Beatrice had been the one who took her in. But it wasn't an embrace. It felt more like being absorbed into a whirlwind of sighs, sharp words, and endless tasks. Ilara, those cups won't wash themselves. Beatrice's voice, raspy from years of shouting over train whistles and impatient travelers, cut through the noise. She was a woman perpetually on the verge of collapse, her face etched with worry lines, her movements jerky with exhaustion. The cafe barely made ends meet. Every penny counted, and Beatrice made sure Ilara understood that she too had to contribute. School was a luxury Ilara rarely got to experience. The few times she'd managed to slip away for a morning, she'd returned to such a storm of anger and piled up work that the brief taste of learning felt too costly. So Ilara swept floors before dawn, wiped down sticky counters, scrubbed burnt pots, and carried heavy trays of lukewarm tea and dry biscuits to tired travelers. Her back ached, her feet were perpetually sore, but she moved with a quiet determination, a small shadow weaving through the chaos. She learned to be invisible, to anticipate Beatrice's moods, to find scraps of quiet between the trains. Her greatest joy, a secret tucked deep inside her heart, was watching the people who came and went. They carried suitcases, worn leather valises, or neat bandboxes. They were heading somewhere. Some looked happy, others anxious, some simply weary. Ilara would imagine their destinations, their lives beyond the smoky station walls. She saw glimpses of the world she yearned for, a world with clean clothes, warm beds, and maybe, just maybe, a kind face that smiled just for her. There was one traveler Ilara noticed more than others. He wasn't a regular commuter, but he appeared every few weeks. An older gentleman, perhaps in his late 60s, with kind eyes that seemed to hold a quiet sadness. He always wore a simple but well-kept tweed coat and carried a worn leather briefcase. He'd order a single cup of black coffee, sit at the small table by the window, and read a book. He didn't speak much, but his presence felt calm amidst the rush. Ilara noticed small things about him, how he handled his teacup with care, how his eyes lingered thoughtfully on the pages of his book, how he always offered a small, polite nod and a gentle smile if their eyes met. He never demanded anything, never complained about the tepid coffee or the slow service. He just was. One particularly gray, cold afternoon, the station was nearly empty between trains. Beatrice was slumped in a chair behind the counter, snoring softly. Ilara was wiping down tables, her shoulders hunched against the chill that seeped in from the platform. The older gentleman was there, in his usual spot, his face illuminated by the weak light filtering through the grimy window. He closed his book and sighed, a soft, gentle sound. Ilara hesitated, then continued her wiping. Suddenly he spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "It's a hard life, isn't it, child?" Ilara froze, startled to be addressed directly. She looked at him, her large eyes full of apprehension. I helped my aunt," she mumbled, gripping the damp rag. He didn't pry. He simply looked at her, his gaze compassionate. "You have a good heart. I can see it," he said softly. "That's worth more than all the cups in this station." Ilara didn't know how to respond. No one had ever said anything like that to her. She felt a strange warmth bloom in her chest, quickly followed by a flush of embarrassment. She quickly turned back to her task, scrubbing a stubborn ring on the table. He didn't press further that day, but his words stayed with her, a small ember of warmth in the chill. From then on, their silent connection deepened. He'd sometimes leave a small coin on the table, more than enough for the coffee, a gesture Ilara understood as kindness rather than payment. Once he brought a small, smooth stone, polished by the sea, and left it by his cup. Ilara picked it up later, turning it over in her fingers, feeling its cool weight. It was the most precious thing she owned. He learned her name somehow, perhaps heard Beatrice call it sharply. Ilara, he'd say sometimes, a soft greeting as he sat down. Another day. One evening, later than usual, a train had been delayed. Ilara was exhausted, her eyes gritty. Beatrice was pacing, complaining about the lost earnings and the extra work. Ilara was sweeping, her small body aching. She heard Beatrice talking on the old wall-mounted telephone, her voice tight with frustration. "No, I just can't manage anymore, Martha. She's getting bigger, needs proper clothes, needs school. It's too much. I was thinking, that place your cousin mentioned, up near the mountains, they take in children, don't they? Just until she's old enough to properly work, or maybe longer. It's for the best, really. I just can't give her what she needs here." Ilara froze, the broom clattering to the floor. That place near the mountains. She'd heard whispers of it. A bleak, cold building where children were sent when no one wanted them. A place of strict rules and no laughter. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Sending her away? Tears welled in her eyes, silent and hot. She couldn't bear it, anywhere but there. She fled into the small, musty storage room behind the cafe, burying her face in a pile of rough potato sacks, sobs shaking her thin frame. She didn't know how long she stayed there, lost in her fear and sorrow. When she finally emerged, the cafe was empty save for the older gentleman, Mr. Harrison, still sitting at his table, though his coffee cup was empty. Beatrice was gone, perhaps to the back room. Mr. Harrison looked at Ilara, his kind eyes immediately noticing her tear-streaked face and trembling lip. He didn't ask what was wrong, but his gaze was full of understanding. He simply beckoned her over with a gentle hand. Ilara hesitated, then slowly approached his table. She stood twisting the hem of her worn apron, unable to look him in the eye. "Ilara," he said softly, "life has a way of throwing storms at us, doesn't it?" She nodded, a small, miserable bob of her head. "Sometimes," he continued, his voice a low rumble, "when a storm is too big for one person to weather, another person comes along, like a sturdy ship." Ilara finally looked up, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. Just then, Beatrice re-entered the cafe, her face still drawn with worry, but now set with a hard resolve. She saw Mr. Harrison talking to Ilara, and her expression hardened further. "What's this? Mr. Harrison, I apologize if she's been bothering you. Ilara, back to work. That floor needs sweeping again." Mr. Harrison raised a hand, a quiet gesture that somehow commanded attention. "Please, Mrs. Beatrice, Ilara wasn't bothering me. We were having a quiet chat." He looked directly at Beatrice, his expression serious but not unkind. "I couldn't help but overhear part of your conversation earlier, about Ilara's future." Beatrice stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "That's none of your business, sir." "Perhaps not directly," Mr. Harrison replied calmly. "But I have come to know Ilara a little, simply by being a frequent traveler through your cafe. I see her working tirelessly, day after day. I see a bright spark in her eyes that deserves to be nurtured, not extinguished." He paused, taking a breath. Ilara watched, wide-eyed, her heart pounding. "I am a widower, Mrs. Beatrice," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice softening slightly. "My home is quiet, my children are grown and live far away. I travel primarily for appointments now, but my life is perhaps too empty. I have observed Ilara for many months. I see her resilience, her gentle nature, her quiet strength." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "You mentioned you feel you cannot provide what she needs. Specifically, I believe, schooling and a stable environment?" Beatrice looked away, her face troubled. "It's true, this place, it takes everything out of you. There's no time, no money left over for books or tutors, and she needs more than this." She gestured around the tired cafe. "I was arranging for her to go to a children's home up north. It's a proper place, they say, structured." Ilara flinched, a tiny movement Mr. Harrison didn't miss. "Mrs. Beatrice," he said, his voice filled with quiet earnestness. "What if there was another option? One that didn't involve sending her away to a place you yourself seem uncertain about?" Beatrice looked wary. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting," Mr. Harrison said, looking from Beatrice to Ilara, "that Ilara come and live with me." A stunned silence fell over the cafe, broken only by the distant rumble of a train. Alara stared at Mr. Harrison, utterly bewildered. Beatrice's jaw dropped. "Live with you?" Beatrice finally sputtered. "But what, why? You're a stranger." "I am a stranger who has observed this child's plight," Mr. Harrison replied gently. "And I am a man who has the means and, more importantly, the desire to offer her a stable home, a proper education, and the chance to simply be a child. I can provide for her. I have a comfortable home, space enough, and the time to ensure she attends school, is well fed and cared for. I believe she deserves that chance." Beatrice ran a hand through her thinning hair. I, I don't understand. You want to take her in? Just like that?" "Not just like that," Mr. Harrison clarified. "Legally, of course, we would involve the proper authorities to ensure everything is done correctly with your full consent. I am not looking for a servant, Mrs. Beatrice. I am offering a home, a chance for Alara to thrive. Perhaps, perhaps it could be beneficial for both of you. You could focus on keeping the cafe afloat without the added burden, and Alara could have the future she deserves." He spoke about it so simply, so calmly, as if offering a cup of tea. But the weight of his words was immense. For Alara, it was a sudden, blinding ray of sunlight piercing the perpetual gray of her life. For Beatrice, it was an easy way out, a way to resolve a problem that felt insurmountable, presented by a seemingly respectable gentleman. Beatrice chewed on her lip, her eyes darting between Alara and Mr. Harrison. The children's home felt like failure, like casting Alara aside. But keeping her felt impossible. This offer, unexpected and incredible as it was, felt like a lifeline for her as much as for Alara. You, you would truly do that?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "I would," Mr. Harrison confirmed with a gentle smile directed at Alara. "If Alara is willing and if you agree." Beatrice looked at Alara, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in a long time. She saw the hope flickering in the child's eyes mixed with fear. She saw the weariness of years of hardship on that small face. A flicker of something, perhaps guilt, perhaps just relief, crossed Beatrice's face. I, I would need to think," Beatrice mumbled. "Of course," Mr. Harrison said. "But please think carefully. Think of what is truly best for Alara." Over the next few days, Mr. Harrison returned to the cafe. He spoke with Beatrice at length, explaining his circumstances, showing her identification, and talking about the legal steps they would take. He was patient and reassuring. Beatrice, overwhelmed and seeing no other viable path that didn't crush her completely, eventually agreed. Papers were signed, witnessed by a kind station master who knew Beatrice and vouched for Mr. Harrison's apparent sincerity. Alara felt numb through much of it, like she was floating just outside her own body. Could this be real? Was she truly leaving? The day came quickly. Her few meager possessions were packed into a small worn cloth bag. There were no tearful goodbyes from Beatrice, just a brusque, "Be a good girl, Alara. Mr. Harrison will take care of you now." It wasn't unkind, just devoid of warmth. Alara felt a pang of something unidentifiable. Not sadness for leaving Beatrice, but perhaps for the family she'd never truly had. Mr. Harrison was waiting patiently on the platform. He didn't rush her. He simply took her small bag and offered her his hand. His grip was warm and steady. "Ready for a new adventure, Alara?" he asked gently. Alara nodded, her heart a confusing mix of terror and excitement. She didn't look back as they walked toward the waiting train. The train ride felt like traveling into a dream. Alara sat by the window, watching the familiar landscape of the station town recede, replaced by rolling green fields and distant hills. Mr. Harrison sat beside her, occasionally pointing out something interesting. A flock of birds, a distant farmhouse, the way the clouds looked like sheep. He didn't chatter, just offered quiet observations, giving her space to process. He shared a simple, delicious picnic he had packed: sandwiches, an apple, and a thermos of warm milk. It was the most wonderful meal Alara had ever had. When they arrived at their destination, it was a small, charming town, nothing like the smoky industrial center of the station. Mr. Harrison's house was not a grand mansion, but a cozy two-story cottage with a little garden. It smelled of beeswax polish and old paper. Inside, it was filled with books. Shelves lined every wall in the living room. There were comfortable armchairs, a crackling fire in the hearth, and a general air of peace and quiet warmth. Mr. Harrison showed her to a small room upstairs. It had a real bed, covered with a soft quilt, a small desk, and a window that looked out onto a garden filled with colorful flowers. Even in the late season, there was a small wardrobe already filled with new clothes that fit. A simple dress, sturdy shoes, warm socks. Elora traced the pattern on the quilt with a finger, tears blurring her vision. But these were different tears. Tears of disbelief, of overwhelming relief, of a fragile, budding hope. "This is your room, Elora," Mr. Harrison said, his voice gentle. "It's all yours. You are safe here. This is your home now." Over the following weeks and months, Elora's life transformed in ways she had only dared to dream. Mr. Harrison was everything she hadn't known she needed. He was patient, kind, and consistent. He woke her gently in the mornings, made her warm porridge for breakfast, and walked her to the small local school himself, proudly introducing her to the headmistress. School was a revelation. The quiet yearning she'd felt watching the children from the station platform was replaced by the vibrant reality of learning. She discovered a love for reading, for stories that transported her to other worlds. Her small hands, used to scrubbing, now learned to hold a pen, to form letters, to fill notebooks with words and numbers. She made friends, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. She laughed, played games at recess, and felt, truly felt, like she belonged. At home, Mr. Harrison taught her things too. How to tend the small garden, how to bake simple bread that filled the cottage with a beautiful aroma, how to play checkers by the fire. He read to her every evening from thick storybooks, his voice a comforting balm. They talked about her day, about the books they were reading, about the world. He listened, really listened, to her small observations and questions. Elara learned about Mr. Harrison's life too. He showed her photographs of his late wife, a kind-faced woman with eyes much like his own. He spoke of his children with quiet affection. He was a man who had known love and loss, and who had chosen to fill the quiet spaces in his life with unexpected kindness. She was no longer the tired shadow sweeping the station floor. She was Elara. She had a name that was spoken with warmth, a room of her own, books to read, friends to play with, and a future unfolding before her like the pages of a brand new story. The calluses on her hands faded, replaced by the ink stains of a diligent student. The perpetual ache in her body disappeared, replaced by the energy of a healthy, happy child. Sometimes on a clear afternoon, Elara and Mr. Harrison would walk to a small hill overlooking the town. From there, they could see the distant railway tracks, a thin silver ribbon stretching towards other places. Elara would watch a train pass, no longer with a longing for escape, but with a quiet understanding of journeys. Not just journeys across land, but the unexpected, life-changing journeys of the heart. Elara's story is a testament to the quiet miracles that can happen when compassion meets need. It's a reminder that kindness, like a warm train pulling into a cold station, can bring with it the promise of a new destination, a safe haven, and the chance for a life filled not with hardship, but with love and light. Sometimes the people who change your life aren't the ones you expect, but rather a kind stranger who simply takes the time to truly see you. And for Elara, being seen made all the difference in the world.